The 401 Files explores the world of the unexplained, cryptids and more. Subscribe now to the 401 Files on YouTube. Join the adventure into the unknown.
Hi everyone and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk, and on this episode I'm once again joined by Rob Davies of Dead Air. Well, it used to be called Dead Air Radio, now it's just Dead Air. As you well know, Rob's been out there and he does a lot of investigations. He does a lot of YouTube sort of I'd call it mini paranormal documentaries. So it's been a few months, and I told him months ago, I said, well, when you've done a few more, I'm going to get you back on. And that's what I've done. I've got him back on an episode for you. Without further ado, let me bring Rob in. Hi, Rob.
Hello, Reeves. It's the third or fourth time now.
Yeah, it's been a few, actually. You're kind of becoming a regular, aren't you?
Yeah, it's an annual thing, a quarterly thing.
Quarterly. Yeah, it's usually. I did say, like I mentioned just now, I did say that I would get you back in because you have been busy. You've got a few new investigations on your YouTube channel, on your Dead Air. It's now Dead Air, isn't it? I get this. Is it now Dead Air or Dead Air Radio?
Dead Air Radio was when we launched it about 13 years ago. Halloween 13 years ago, and then eventually it just became Dead Air after we stopped doing it on the radio. So now it's just Dead Air. Although the YouTube channel is, if you're looking for the proper URL, it's Dead Air TV.
Right. Okay. We got that sorted because, my memory is horrible. But anyway, I said I'd get you back on, and here you are, because you've been busy. As I say, you've been out investigating. I do enjoy your uploads. I do enjoy them, and I say I recommend anyone to go and give them a watch, and there'll be links in the show notes anyway. So when we last spoke, I remember you were going to be going out and doing an investigation a little bit further afield in was it a fort?
Yeah, so it was Halloween 2023. I went over to Norway. It was more of a holiday. I'd love to have the luxury to be able to go out just to record places with the YouTube. I wanted to go to Norway for a while, just because it's Norway, the fjords, everything about it is cool. But I found a location over there, got chatting to a group of, a paranormal team in Norway who kind of helped me out a little bit. There was one location they kind of tipped me in the direction of, that they said, you've got to go and visit a place called Fredrikstad. And I'd seen it on TV shows before. I think Ghost Hunters went over there, Taps. And I thought, yeah, but that's a massive, huge fortress. It's sort of well out the way of where I'd be going in Norway, because I'd be going to like Oslo, maybe across to Bergen, the touristy places. And I'm like, how am I going to get over to this location? But in the end, they were like, no, just get in touch with them. They'll happily accommodate you. And it was really, really interesting. So I went across to Oslo, got a train down to a town called Halden. And then from there, it was a case of, I pretty much had this entire fortress up on the top of a hillside completely to myself. I had the keys to it, had access to go inside. It was unbelievable. And the amount of access I got over there was just, you wouldn't get that in the UK unless you paid like a ridiculous amount of money. I spent a night there, had a little Airbnb in the town, so 10-minute walk from the location. So yeah, it was brilliant. Loved it.
So you're in this fort, you're all alone, and it's a big place, and you got your torch. What were the legends or the ghostly phenomenon that was kind of tied to it?
So you mentioned, being all on your own. The main legend is that there's supposed to be a grey lady who, and this is where it gets the irony of being on your own, she attacks men and she has been apparently known to have killed someone before by pushing them from the top of the highest point on the fortress and straight down onto rocks below.
Right.
Nobody knows exactly who she is. She's believed to have had an affair with someone from one of the armies, one of the Norwegian army that was based there, and then jumped from the top herself. That's the legend of it. Usually when you go to these places and there's a story like that where there's no name or details, it's usually, you think, is it a story? Did that really happen? So she's meant to be the most famous ghost that haunts the place, but there's obviously more. When you learn about the history of it, this place has been attacked tens of times, lots of death around it. The King of Sweden was assassinated in a trench just in front of the building. The interesting thing was, I was using Spirit Box, sweeps the white noise, and I was in a room that was more of a storage room, but it was used originally, it was where they would line the guns up. The ammo would be stored down below, and they would fire from the roof of this building. And it's all just dusty, never gets used for anything. The public don't go in there. I'm running a Spirit Box, and I'm getting stuff coming through. Obviously, it's in Norwegian, so I don't speak a word of Norwegian. But luckily, I sent it off to one of the Norwegian paranormal team that I'd been in contact with, and then they translated it, and it was freaky, because there was a female voice came through, there was a male voice came through, and I hadn't told her what the questions were that I asked. And she came back and she was like, well, this is what this one says, this is what that one said. And I was like, that's so weird. So one of them had said, when did he die? And it came back and apparently it said, between the wars. And another one gave a year. But the interesting thing about it is, you know how a Spirit Box works.
Yeah.
It sweeps the FM band. But in Norway, they've switched FM radio off. There's no FM radio stations at all. It's all digital. It's all like DAB radio over there. FM radio is essentially just a white noise frequency now.
Yeah.
Maybe you might get the odd pirate using it, but realistically, you're not going to get anything on there if you're sweeping a radio. The town itself is on the border with Sweden. You're literally a mile from the Swedish border. So I thought, well, could this be a Swedish radio station that's bleeding through? But then she said, well, no, that Swedish radio stations would be in Swedish. It's a completely different language. So I'm like, okay. So there's Norwegian words coming through, white noise, but there's no FM radio that would be essentially broadcasting anything in Norwegian. So that was a bit weird.
How clear were the voices? I mean, were they like Class A, or whether they needed cleaning up, or what?
They were clear enough that she understood them straight away. I mean, obviously I hear the word and I think, oh, I don't know what that means. It's you were talking like 3 or 4 syllables, but she heard them as full years, like 18. Can't remember what the year was now. She heard the full year, 18 something. I asking for dates and years, but I'd only sent the clip of the EVP. That whole site was odd. There was another location where I was in. The REM pod alarmed while I was talking to camera. I had a phobia of being locked in these places because they've all got these big doors on them. I'd taken the padlock off one of the doors and I deliberately kept the door open by like 2 or 3 centimeters just because I didn't want anything to get locked in. I was on my own. If I got locked in one of these places, I'm there till the next day. So I'd kept these places, like the doors slightly open, just to make sure I wasn't going to get locked in. I heard the padlock moving on the door outside. So I immediately grabbed my bags thinking, oh no, someone's actually seen the doors open and trying to close it. And I go outside and obviously there's nobody there. But I swear down I heard the padlock on the door. There was no wind. I mean, there was wind when you went right up to the top, but when you're down within the fortress, there wasn't a breeze or anything, and that place was just freaky weird. I genuinely think that is one of the most. If I had to list a place that I think was haunted, I would say that was probably more active than any other place I've been for a while. Anyway, certainly for a while.
At what point during the evening's investigation would you say that you felt the most unsettled?
That bit with the padlock. So I didn't go back in there. So I was coming to the end of that section anyway, so I was coming out within. But if you watch the video, like you can hear it in my voice. I wasn't confident enough to go back straight in. So the next section of the video was me up on the top of the fortress outdoors. And I was doing outdoorsy bit from that point on. Ironically, the spot where the grey lady's supposed to push people off. At this point, I also wasn't aware of the voices in the spirit box. I'd heard the voices come through, but I wasn't aware of the translation until 2 or 3 days later, so I had no idea what it had said to me. The fact that a female voice had come through as well, and there's a story of a female entity that's said to haunt the area, has apparently killed people. That was interesting. It would have possibly changed the course of the investigation if I'd known what was coming through, but that place was just full on. You just go through the history of it and you can see why it was haunted. I mean, it was sieged for years and months, years. And obviously when people died, there was a disease that went through. When people die and you're under siege, you just bury them. And there's a part of this fortress where it's all overgrown, where I got shown earlier in the day. They were like, yeah, there's a lot of people under there. There was a disease that killed, I think 24 people died during the siege. And obviously they haven't taken them out to a graveyard. They haven't buried them in the local church cemetery. They've just buried them down here. So there was people buried in that fortress, unmarked graves. When Sweden attacked it one year, there was this is obviously the legend that they like to tell in Norway, that the town below set itself on fire to stop the Swedes coming in. And obviously people burned to death, and a lot of people died in the houses and the homes. But the truth was, and this is something that they don't tell you in Norway, but the curator, the lady who showed me around, said, well, no, some 2 people from this fortress ran down the hill in the middle of the night and started setting fire to people's houses, sacrificing the people living around the fortress just to create a flame and smoke to stop the attack of the Swedes. And the people died on the hillside. It's crazy. All historically true. You can go on to Google it. You can find the dark history of this place. This was a really dark place.
With such a big building, I mean, it's not like you go into a small house, a 4-bedroom house or whatever, and you kind of know where you are. You got the lay of the land sort of thing. When you go to somewhere like this, a place it's very big. There's lots of rooms. There's lots of hallways. You're not really sure what you're going to expect. How do you? And you're on there on your own as well. You're not with a team. You're on your own. How do you mentally prepare yourself for that?
This is what I tell people. It's kind of like before you go in, you convince yourself that there's no such thing as ghosts. And it's like, it's not just you tell yourself, you say, well, I'm not going to see a ghost. You kind of like put yourself in that frame of mind that Casper's not going to walk through that wall. You're going to go in there. It's going to be dark. That's it. Nothing's going to happen to you. It doesn't happen to people. And you convince yourself that you'll be the only person up there. You might hear some people from the town. There's like a hotel at the bottom of the hill, so you might hear the odd people, but nothing bad's going to happen. And then you kind of like put yourself in this mind where, and I think only broadcasters will know what I'm talking about. It's like you're not alone, because you've got the camera in one hand that you know that people are going to be watching through. So you're talking to people, even though they're not there and they're not going to see this for weeks, months. You've got people there, so if something happens, they're going to see it as well. So the way I liken it to, and this is a totally random, if you look at like prank shows, like game shows where they prank people on hidden camera TV shows where they'll act stupid in public, or they'll go and they'll sort of winding members of the public up. You think, how do you get the guts to go and stand in a busy street and do that?
Yeah.
But then you think in their mind, they're not thinking about the people around them. They're thinking about the millions of people at home on ITV or BBC One that are laughing at this, that are on their side. They're not thinking about the couple of hundred people that are in the middle of the shopping centre or whatever. And I think that's kind of like how you do it. You put yourself in the mind that there's other people watching you that are with you.
You're putting yourself in your kind of own personal safe space where you've got a camera and you're talking into the camera as if it was real time, as if you were doing a live stream, and those people are literally on the other side of that camera listening to every word that you're saying, even though it's being pre-recorded, and as you say, they might not see it for a month, 6 months, a year. But yeah, I think that when you do stuff like that, I suppose it psychologically it does help. But being in such a vast, large building, I don't know. I've never been in anywhere like that big. I think that it does take a little bit of, especially on your own, going in somewhere like on your own. I mean, were you worried about stepping off a hallway with no safety net or anything like that? Did you worry about stuff like that?
The dodgiest part was probably the very top, where apparently people get pushed off. But they have put a railing up, which I joked about at the time, saying that they've put this railing up because of the ghost story. But I was more disappointed that I didn't see all of it. I simply didn't have time. The fortress was so big. There was one block of it which I wasn't allowed in, where during the Second World War, the Nazis obviously occupied Norway. They used this block to torture prisoners of war and to extract information from them. Again, I was a bit like, would that have worked on a video? Would that have been a bit too recent, bit too incentive? I wasn't sure, but I wasn't allowed in there anyway. There was parts that I couldn't go in. There was one part of it was a restaurant, which is obviously privately owned, but on the same site. So obviously I couldn't go in that, but that was one of the old barracks. So there's probably about half of it I didn't get to see, but if I wanted to see it all, I would have needed 2 or 3 nights to have done the entire fortress. But I mainly went to where people said that stuff happens, because obviously there's a Norwegian paranormal group, which I'll do a shout out for. They're called Paranormal Energy Norway. They do their thing. They cover these places in Norway. They've got access to incredible places, and they were the ones who put me in touch with the fortress and gave me advice and told me this is the best place to go. This is what to do. Yeah, so they've investigated this place a few times, and they've got their interesting things from there as well. But in the UK, if there was a place like this that existed, it would be every paranormal investigator's ambition to get into it, and they would probably charge you about £1,300 to hire it out. But it's a different ball game over there. It's like they're kind of happy to have you go in and to have you recording and covering their thing. It's kind of like a privilege for them. That was the impression I got from it when I spoke to the staff there.
I mean, we were talking a little bit about this pre-show, and a lot of the paranormal stuff over here now, where you go, it's very commercial. It's very sort of pay to play sort of thing, where you pay a fee and you go with a bunch of other people, and it's kind of hit and miss whether those people that you'll end up with are serious about it or just doing it for a goof. And it can be kind of a little bit disheartening if you're there because you're hoping to maybe experience something, or just go in there to soak up the atmosphere, and you've got other people there who are they've paid their money and they want to have fun. They want to just goof around a little bit, and it's those two things. Sometimes they don't work together, and I think it's very commercial like that over here. And I'd like with the likes of the shows like that we have over here, and shows in America, the ghost shows in America. I think that's kind of generated that kind of mindset where if you've got a haunted place that you can investigate here, but you're going to need to pay me some coin. So I think that in Europe, I mean, there are places in Europe, I'm sure, that do the same thing. But as you say, they're a little bit more open to people coming in and doing an investigation, and maybe spread the word a little bit, word of mouth, go, I did a video here and here's where it is. And maybe they work at it that way, so that they're doing it more of a kind of a networking. Would you sort of say that?
That's the way I kind of like it. And the problem is a lot of the commercial groups who hire these venues out and sell tickets for £60-70, and you turn up and that kind of covers the cost of it. That's where a lot of these venues are setting their rates at, which is annoying, because if I turn up, I don't want to be paying up to £1,000 to hire a castle out. I don't want to, I only want to be there, film my thing, and then go. I don't want to be there till, from 8 till 4 in the morning or whatever. A lot of places are now sort of saying, well, okay, you can make a donation. You can sort of make it, and then that leaves the problem of how big or small do you make your donation, because a donation could be technically anything. And then there's the sensible option, which I think is probably the best option, and that's you pay for someone who, if there needs to be somebody on site to open up and lock up, you pay for somebody to essentially be there, which wouldn't cost an arm and a leg, but you're just paying a few hours for their time, and they're there just to ensure that you're not going to smash the place up, and you're not going to leave the place wide open all night. But that would be the sensible option. But like you say, places have clicked, and they know that there's money to be made in this, and people will pay that. There'll be a lot of groups that will pay the hundreds, the thousands to go in and investigate it. I think there should be two different rates for that. One for, if you're taking a group of 20, 30 people in and selling tickets, that should be a separate price. But then you're going to get people who don't want to go in there all night with 30 people. They just want to go in there with maybe you on your own, or if you've got a small group that you film in for a channel, whatever, and you just pay like a donation, or you'll chip in and pay a small amount each. It helps the venue, because a lot of these places are museums that have volunteers or need that kind of money to keep them open. So I kind of get why they need some revenue from it, but I understand that it's frustrating for content creators that just want to go and do their own thing.
I mean, it is a bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, if you've got a venue that has got genuine paranormal activity in it, and you want to involve people and you want to give people access to it, but you've got running costs, you've got bills to pay, you've got electric to pay, you've got wear and tear and stuff, so you're going to need to charge something, and that's fair enough. I haven't got a problem with that. I don't see a problem with that. It's just logical that you would say that a group of people can come in, and like a team, an investigation team could come in and do an overnight here, and there's a small fee you need to pay, and that covers the costs, and everyone's happy. But it's more sort of corporate now. I'm on about the corporate stuff where you get large groups of people and they hire venues which are, the paranormal stories that are attached to them are a little bit more, maybe, where's the information to back this up? Well, this old lady said something or whatever, and it's it's all kind of hearsay, and it's all very corporate, and come on in and we'll do this, and you're going to experience that, and the paranormal doesn't work like that. And if it is working like that every single time, then there's something pretty dodgy going on. So I mean, that's just my outlook. I mean, I've got no problem with people charging a ticket fee to do something, but if you've got to pay the bills, I understand that, but I'm on about the corporate side of it, where it's become very sort of funfairish now, and people go there to be scared. They expect to be scared, so you have to put on that show to scare people, and it's kind of sad in a way that it's gone like that. But it was going to go like that anyway, and I'm not saying that everywhere's like that, because it isn't. So it is a double-edged sword, and unfortunately, that's the way it is at the moment, and I can't see it changing anytime soon. But I just want to quickly move on a minute, because I've got lots of questions for you, and we get stuck on one topic, and we're going to be talking for ages on one thing. But I was going to ask you, going from such a big place, right, such a large fort, you're there on your own, you're doing your investigation, you've had a couple of little scary things, and you're thinking, I've experienced some weird stuff. But the next most recent video you've done, you ended up in Nottingley in a mortuary. How did that come about?
Yeah, that's Nottingley Town Hall. So that's just to put context to Nottingley. It's just in Yorkshire. If you know where like Pontefract, Wakefield is, it's kind of in that sort of area. And I know that a lot of like town halls and community centres now are doing the ghost hunt thing, because it brings a bit of revenue in for them. But Nottingley, it's got an interesting story to it, in that it was used during the war as a mortuary it was essentially for air raid victims. So if the town got bombed, that would be where they would take the bodies to. And it was also a first aid station. So if stuff happened, if there was an air raid, there would be sort of medically trained people there. And the irony of it was, and obviously the horrible irony of it was, a busload of RAF pilots crashed into the side of the vicarage wall, which ran alongside the building, and 8 of them were killed. 6 of them died on the spot. So their bodies were taken into the very building that they crashed into. Just the absolute irony of it, they crashed into a first aid station. The bodies were taken downstairs. 2 of them were taken to a hospital but died later on, so they didn't go there. And there's all sorts of stories about people seeing stuff down there. The actual floor of this cellar itself is the original foundation of an old monastery. So you've got that, if you believe in the whole stone tape theory kind of thing, you've got that layer of history to it as well. So that was really, really good. So I got access to Nottingley Town Hall itself, which was, I would say, an all right place, but it's when you get down there, there's so many ghost stories about it. There was an old caretaker who died not that long ago. We're talking early 2000s, putting Christmas decorations up. He fell off his ladder, but he was nicknamed Mr. Town Hall because he spent his entire life helping out at this town hall. He was on the council, and people see him in the building, but it's not like paranormal, like you see him out the corner of your eye. It's kind of a story about people. Oh, I saw such and such the other day, and I walked past him. Oh, he can't have done. He's been dead for 2 years or whatever. It's like those kind of stories. So this building, I was so interested that you've got stone tape theory in the bottom. You've got apparently a soldier that doesn't know they're dead that roams the cellar, which kind of adds another paranormal theory to it. And then you've got this guy that's been seen as clear as day upstairs, as if he's real, like you or I, like solid figure. So it's like all these different theories of the paranormal mixed into one building, which I found it fascinating because obviously a lot of people believe in ghosts. A lot of people have their own theories of it. I don't know whether you could accept all 3 of the theories are true. I think if you believe in ghosts, you either believe it's energy or you believe it's a memory. So it's kind of interesting that you've got all the different theories of hauntings mixed into one building. So that was quite an interesting place to go to.
What kind of evidence did you get there?
The most I got from it was REM pod alarming, which is, again, everyone's got their own theory on REM pods. They're not 100% reliable. For anyone who doesn't know what a REM pod is, it's basically a device which generates its own electro field around it. So if something breaks that field, i.e. touches it, or even goes near it, it will alarm. And if it actually touches it, it flashes as well. So I was getting the alarm going off. And the thing you've got to point out with a lot of these devices are they are quite susceptible to modern, like, so apparently you can set them off with called walkie-talkies, little portable radios. They're really notorious. So you hear a lot of paranormal groups that go around and they're using their walkie-talkies, but all the REM pods going off at the same time. So yeah, that's obviously a different subject. But I was using a REM pod, but I'm not using walkie-talkies. I'm on my own down in this cellar floor, and it alarms literally 5 meters away from me. So I'm nowhere near it. Whether that's paranormal, whether that's something scientific, maybe something was like a moth or something was floating around, and I don't know. It was an interesting night.
How did the building make you feel personally?
Only the cellar was intimidating. The rest of the building was just a normal. And I think it comes down to that whole, if somewhere feels modern, it doesn't feel scary. So I've been in old workhouses before where it's been renovated into a modern day classroom with whiteboards and overhead projectors and things. And you wouldn't think you were in an old building, and you don't feel scared in them. But as soon as you go into a place that looks a bit abandoned, a bit run down, it's kind of, I think it's mentally a bit of more of a psychological thing that you get more on edge about. But for me, Nottingley Town Hall, I think I could quite comfortably sleep in the upstairs rooms or the upstairs floors, wouldn't feel anything about it. But that cellar, when you go down there, because it's a cellar, because it's dark, it's got no windows, it's old stone, it's got that vibe about it. And to be honest, I do enjoy that a lot more. But if anyone, like I say, go and visit it yourself, it's they do have paranormal nights on there, so it's an interesting place.
Yeah, it's interesting you pick up on the workhouse being an old building that's obviously got a lot of history, and people are there who don't really want to be there because they've got no other choice unless they starve to death. It's been modernised in modern day, and you go into the modern part and it just feels like a new building. And one of the places that I used to work at was ballroom stroke theatre, and I worked there when I was I just left school actually. I was about 17 years old, I think, and your parents are like, get out and get a job. And my mum got me this job. It was only a weekend job. Basically, I was working in a cafeteria, which was attached to the ballroom where people would come and buy cups of tea and stuff. My job was to keep the area clean, sweep up, clean any mess up. And it was my first job. Well, one day they said to me, do you want to nip upstairs and get some more chairs? It's because there was more people there. They needed chairs for people to sit. I was going to get these chairs that were at the top of the landing. And I noticed this door, this really old door. It was like, it must have been, I don't know, 100 years old. It was a really old door. And I thought, I need to go through that door. I need to go through it. It was slightly open and it had like cobwebs on it and stuff. It was really old. And so I go through this door and it's a long hallway. Either side of this long hallway is cubicles. And I'm thinking, it's like really dark and dingy. There was a couple of little skylights either side, 'cause it was like in the roof. And I go in there, right? And I start looking around. There's old costumes in there hung up. And each little cubicle's got like a curtain you draw across. And some of them are drawn back and some of them aren't drawn back. I go into some of these cubicles and there's all these old pictures of old acts that had played at the theatre.
Yeah.
From like the 50s and the 30s and the 20s. And there was like notations stuck on, like pinned on next to the mirrors where people would get ready. Obviously, but it was all like very cluttered. But there was like these old black and white half curled photographs of two people together with the signature, all the best or whatever, stuff like that. Now I was walking through, it was almost like I had stepped back in time.
I totally get what you mean. And then you see these dark places, you want to go and explore, you want to see what's in there, but it's a shame you didn't still have access to it. That would be an interesting place to go to.
It's now a block of flats. So that part of the theatre area, basically, it's been completely gutted. And it's now what I would call, not luxury flats, but, high-end apartments. So the space itself, long gone. On that note, Rob, I think that we've reached the end of this episode. But before we go, I want you to tell me a little bit about, because you started podcasting as well. How did that come about, and where can people find your podcast episodes?
The way it came about was probably just me being over creative. So I started investigating a location, researching a location sometime last year. An incredible location. If you found this out, every ghost hunter would want to come to this place. It's basically now more of a place for retired miners to go on holiday. So it's like a hotel type place in North Yorkshire. We're talking a few miles out of Scarborough. And it used to be owned by the Roundtree family, the people who made confectionery, sweets, fruit pastels. They had mansions. They were really wealthy. So they had this house built. And this was a time era where rich Western people would go abroad and they would bring back things like ancient mummies. Not many people know this, but the Roundtree family actually had their own mummy and they kept it in the library of this building. And obviously paranormal stuff was reported. Even today, someone recently said their dog would refuse to go in the room where the mummy once used to be. There's a story by Jean Roundtree, who was the last surviving member of the Roundtree family, and she confirmed that this happened. The kids were so terrified of this mummy that they buried it in the garden. And it's still there now, in the grounds of this estate. And it's now got a bowling green on the top of it. But not many people know this.
Was it like a famous mummy? Was it like a kind of on a level of like Tutankhamun? Or is it just like a lower end sort of just a general mummy that they
Probably the latter. Because what used to happen is they used to go around auctions and these American, British, French guys would come over, throw their money around and they'd take a mummy home. And that was like what they used to do. And the locals would make a bit of money by selling these mummified bodies. It probably wasn't anybody well known, but there's lots of reports of a blue diamond that gets seen outside, like a glowing bright light over the site where this supposed mummy is buried. And I've tried to contact this place and say, look, can I come down and stay there? Because obviously you have to be a member of a union that was for only ex-miners can go there and stay there, like a holiday home type location, so that they won't let me in. But I thought the story's too good and I want to make content about it, but obviously I can't go and film it. I can't go and make a video, but I really want to tell the story. So I thought, well, what if I start a podcast series and put that into there, then I can still be creative and tell the story. But obviously, it wouldn't be on a YouTube video; it would be on a podcast. So then I toyed with the idea, and it went from there. So the idea of it was places that I can't go and investigate, but the stories would make such great content would go into this podcast. So that's kind of what I'm looking at doing with this. And it's kind of evolved from there now, where each episode's got a different subject. So it's gone from mummies to reincarnation. The next one's going to be about time slips, because I've been researching that. I found a few interesting cases on time slips. They sound incredibly far-fetched, but some of these stories are actually really, really interesting.
There's some good ones.
So it's got that. So we kickstarted it with the 13th anniversary of Dead Air, which we launched on Halloween 2010. So it was on the 13th anniversary. We looked back at one location that we did, which is sadly no longer accessible, but it's such an amazing location, and there's a big petition to get it reopened again. So I wanted to get behind that campaign to try and open it's a place called the Cooperage in Newcastle. So I was literally the only and last person to investigate that place, and yet it's got such a famous haunted history, and it would be amazing if it reopened. But so that the series is on there. It's called the Dead Air Clinically Dead Podcast. So it's on Spotify. Just do a search for it, you'll find it. And like I say, it's still in the early days, so it's still finding its feet and growing, but it's something to run alongside the YouTube channel.
Excellent. Well, all the links will be in the description, so look below and you'll find links to Rob's YouTube channel and also to Rob's podcast. I just want to take this moment to thank Rob again for joining me. He'll be back on another episode, I'm sure, later on in the year when he's done a few more investigations for a catch-up, because it's always interesting hearing hearing your sort of, your experiences firsthand. If everybody's listened for this long, then I want to thank everybody for sticking with us. Once again, thanks for listening. Remember to give it a like and a share wherever you're able to. And until next time, talk to you soon.